how y'all doing? My name is Chey, and today I can barely form words, so I'm gonna be talking about people who can do it much better than I can. Ready? Rolling. Full disclosure, I am not at full Chey capacity today. I just worked a 14-hour shift yesterday because my venue was holding a big parking lot concert festival thing, and so the past 2 days have just been... I got home at 1 a.m. last night after a 14-hour shift, slept for 4 hours, and now I'm here. And because I'm on the edge of a 14-hour shift and 4 hours of sleep, I hope that I won't have that much to say. The Chey curse, if you're not new here, is, you know, I say, I'm gonna keep this short and quick, and then it's like 15 minutes long. I really don't think that's gonna be the case today. But we'll see if I'm wrong. We'll see if I'm wrong about me. We'll see if I know me, but I don't. By the way, can you see how many bruises I have on my arm from load in and load out yesterday? Insanity. The ebook that I read this month was God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater by Kurt Vonnegut. Real quick context explanation. For no particular reason, I'm just reading Kurt Vonnegut's entire bibliography chronologically, and God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater was the next one on my list. I do plan on eventually getting this book in a physical format, that way I can annotate it properly, but my local library didn't have a physical version for me to check out first. They did have the ebook version though, so that's what I got. Not much to say about this book. I did enjoy it. Was not my favorite Kurt Vonnegut book, but it was good. With this book, I can definitely start to see him rounding out his themes and his views on certain politics and satire in the world. I do think it's, without waxing poetic about my whole Vonnegut annotating experience, I do think this book is where we begin to see a shift in his views. It seems like there's a little bit more cynicism in the satire, which is fine. It's just, whereas the first couple books seem to be outright rock solid on certain viewpoints, there's a little bit more give and take in this book. There's a little bit more showing of both sides. The good and the bad sides. Even at the beginning of Vonnegut's work, I think he feels comfortable as a writer. Like, I think you read his work and you're like, this is a writer who feels comfortable in their element, who feels comfortable in their craft. In this book, though, I think the experience really starts to show itself, where it doesn't just feel like they're comfortable in their writing, but it feels like they're so comfortable that there's starting to be a shift, there's starting to be more trial and experimenting. So I'm interested to see where the next book goes, because I think the next book is Slaughterhouse 5, which is, I think, the most famous Kurt Vonnegut book. So it's interesting to see how this book might be the pivot point in comparison to Slaughterhouse 5 and how the writing changes, what parallels, what differs, what's the same. Really interesting. I will say the most interesting thing about God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater is I'm also rereading currently and annotating Hamlet, because it's just one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. And I did not know this beforehand. As I was reading God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, Hamlet is mentioned time and time again. And the first time it popped up, it's a very dead-on comparison, comparing the main character to Hamlet as he's writing a letter to his wife, talking about her as Ophelia. And I was like, oh crap. You're telling me I'm gonna have to go back and reread this book once I get it in physical form and annotate it in context with just Hamlet while I'm rereading Hamlet again alongside this book to see if there's any niche references or anything else that I can pick up and compare to and dig into. I've never been much of a scholar, but this book and Hamlet and a coincidence might make me into one. I was never a scholar, says the former history university student. I originally was listening to 3 audiobooks this month, but 2 of them got returned before I could finish them, and now other people have them, and there are other people waiting in line, and the hold for them is over a month, so I won't get to finish them until probably the end of this month, or even next month. Yay! Oh well, not a big deal, I'll finish it whenever. The one that I did get to finish, because it was only a 3-hour listen, it was very, very short, but it was very good, was Here Goes Nothing by Eamon? Pretty sure it's Eamon. Here Goes Nothing by Eamon McGrath. I don't know why I did this. I do that a lot when I talk. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Like, I'm throwing my words at you, like, hey. This book does not have good ratings on Goodreads. Which just goes to vindicate me, or validate me, I guess, that I should never ever listen to Goodreads to dictate what will interest me and what will not. At least in terms of the court of public opinion. What is that hair doing? And when I read the description that it was about touring musicians and experience about life on the road, download. Give it to me now. As an audio engineer and just generally someone who has grown up sleeping, eating, breathing every bit of music and that world that I can, I suck up any of those books, any fiction, any non-fiction about that kind of subject, just like a vacuum. A very brief general synopsis of this book is it's sort of a fictional memoir, I believe, is the best way to describe it, about this touring musician, and it's told in sort of a parallel format of two different timelines. So the first timeline we're following is one of the first bands that this musician ever toured with, and some of his first experiences on the road as a young touring musician in the local scene. Then the other timeline we follow is a skip ahead in the future after he's left that band, he's left that scene, and now he's with another group, even in another country. As it shows such parallel timelines, I think the book does a good job at showing how experience and growth changes a person's perspective over time and how it feeds into reflection on memories. This book talks a lot about being cognizant of making memories in the moment, but in that way I think it also does a good job at when we're in the next timeline, or rather in the more present timeline, looking back on those same memories. I think it does a fantastic job at reflecting on how those memories felt when they knew they were being made versus how they look now that there has been more perspective and more growth and more time has passed between, and how that really informs a person and their perspective and their view on the world. Is this book beautifully and fantastically written? No. I think it's very gritty, I think it's raw, I think it's real. If I had to give it an aesthetic, I would give it kind of the Fight Club movie aesthetic. The entire time I was listening to this book, and maybe it's because I was listening to the audiobook, which was fantastic, though I had to listen to it on double speed, it's sort of like the image of Brad Pitt smoking in Fight Club. Like, that was the aesthetic vibe that I got from this book. But don't take that as like the masculine dude bro, like red flag, Fight Club is my favorite movie kind of vibe. That's not what I mean. I mean more like the back alley, like beat up, cigarette hanging out the mouth, rock music thumping in the club next door, again with this. Stop it. That kind of vibe. I have also never been a touring musician, but I have worked with a ton of touring bands, a ton of touring artists. I have friends that are in touring bands. I work in audio, so I was able to relate to a ton of this story, both personally and through my friends. From my perspective, from my experiences, shared experience, blah blah blah, I do think that it was very accurate. There were a lot of times when I was listening and I was like, yep, yeah, exactly. Like, there were parts where he was talking about showing up to a venue, and when you're doing load-in and carrying all the equipment, the band is carrying all the equipment, one person will inevitably say, oh, I have to go ask the sound engineer a question, and then just happen to only show up when the load-in is done, having never carried in anything except maybe a guitar case. Funny how that happens. Funny how that happens every single time, right? Just moments like that, I think, really made this book for me. Do I think this book will be generally enjoyable to people not a part of that scene, not a part of that world? Yeah. I think so, but I think you have to be ready for a very certain vibe, because like I said, it is very gritty. Also, of course, always check content warnings before you read any of these books. Now we're to the physical books. We have Burn the Place by Elena Regan. Regan? Please don't beat me up. This is a memoir that I picked up not too long ago. I just saw it in a store, read the back of it. It's a memoir of a chef who, kind of like me, grew up in the backwoods running around in the forest on a farm, and I was like, hey, that sounds neat, relatable, I'm a big forest gal, let's pick it up and read it. And I've just been trying to read more memoirs in general this year. I thought this would be an accessible, fun place to start, and I was right. I did really enjoy this book. I knew nothing about the author going into this, had never heard of them, writing or food-wise, and I'm really glad that I went into this book not knowing any of that, because I think it made it all the more exciting. The author hops around a lot in timelines, but never so much so that I think it becomes confusing. It's not more tying them together fully chronologically. It is chronologically, I think, about 60%, but the other 40% is more so weaving memories together around a certain theme. This is another gritty, another very raw book. Please check content warnings. But I really appreciate how this author was able to just share their story, because they have been through a lot, and a lot that was surprisingly relatable for me. I appreciated their frankness and their honesty when telling their story. I don't think they ever shied away from parts that other authors may not include. Or it may just be like a footnote or try to come across as some giant life lesson or moral of the story. This author doesn't do it. They more so share it as part of the memoir, like, hey, this is part of my story. There could be a lesson in here, but this is part of what made me me. This is part of how I got here today. Which it's told like a story and not a lecture, which I really, really appreciated. Like the interpretation for lessons to be learned, like, yeah, the author can point out what they learned. But I do like it when it's told in more of a narrative sense for you to derive your own lessons to be learned, what you take away from the story. Oh, and there are a ton of recipes in here that the author mentions that I really want to try out myself, because I've never been much of a cook, but I did grow up harvesting berries and mushrooms, different things from the woods, from the farm, and it just brought back all those nostalgic memories for me, and I really want to try them out in the context of these recipes. So I would highly recommend this book to you, especially if you are just trying to get into memoirs. I think this might be a good one to start with, particularly if you're really into food. But of course, check your content warnings. Keep yourself safe, keep yourself happy. The next physical book I read was 50 in Reverse by Bill Flanagan. This is a book that I picked up the same time at the same store that I picked up Burn the Place. And the first thing that caught me was this cover. As we know, my ADHD makes me crow-like, and when I see shiny thing, I pick up, because I am interested. But I saw the cassette reels, I saw the tape reels on here, and as I said earlier, anything even music related, I'm like, gimme. Again, another very short book, and the font is very spaced out, very big. And while I had a slow start to this book, I read the rest of it literally in an afternoon. This book follows Peter Wyatt, who in the year, I think it is 2021, maybe 2022, I think it's 2021, he is a 65-year-old man, but troubles are brewing when he suddenly wakes up as his 15-year-old self, all the way back in the spring of 1970. The problem is, Peter has all the memories of his lifetime that he's already lived from age 15 to age 65. But now he's stuck back in his 15-year-old self wondering what happened, how did he get here, how did he time travel, did he time travel, is he dead, what is happening? So this book follows the antics of him trying to convince everyone around him that yes, he is 65, and yes, he knows the future, and yes, he knows everything that's going to happen between 1970 and the 2020s, but also trying to find out what happened and if he can find his way back to his wife and his family and the life that he loves and knows. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was fun, it was easy, very light, surprisingly. It did get a little heavier towards the end, but all the way through it did make me chuckle, did give me a smile. Very easy on the brain to read when, especially this month, I started out the month with COVID, I was very sick, and then I had some mental health stuff I was dealing with. This book was the perfect remedy for being just easy on the brain, a fun little jaunt. And something I particularly loved about this book is that Peter, as a 15-year-old and growing up, was obsessed with music, crazy about music. And he, as he grew up, became a radio DJ, and then eventually he worked for a streaming service. He was a curator of playlists, he was like a curator manager, and so he was over a bunch of people that were curating different playlists for different things, which I thought was a very interesting career path. But then when he goes back to 1970 with all the memories of that 50-year gap, he has all the musical knowledge of that 50 years. But not only that, how the music business works and how the music business was going to grow and evolve. And there's a point where he's starting a high school band with some classmates, and they're talking to a potential manager with potential to get signed, and Peter starts bringing up all these contract clauses about their licensing agreements, their credits, their trademarks. And he's like, this is how it's gonna work. We receive royalty and licensing credits per this, and you only have publishing rights if you adhere to this and do this, and all this legal jargon. And the manager's like, what? That's not how this works. And Peter's like, yeah, that's how it's gonna work. With all this knowledge that a 15-year-old kid should not have about the music business. But as I was reading it, I was just pumping my fist like, yes, he gets it! Like, that is exactly how it works. That is exactly what you need to be doing. So cool. Really insightful. Fun. I think even nostalgic. My mom has been looking for a short book to jump back into reading, and she grew up in the 70s, was a teenager in the 70s. So of course, after I finished this book, I gave it to her. She also really enjoyed it. It was very nostalgic for her. And we both agree that it has sort of a vague ending. I won't spoil it. I won't talk about what happens at the end, whether he gets back to his family or whatever, or if he figures out what happened to him. I will just say, I believe it is vague, and I have my own theory about what happened, but I might share that in another reading vlog. I don't want to give any spoilers in this. If you can find it, pick it up. Really enjoyable, really short, really sweet, funny. Enjoyed it. Okay, we're saving the heaviest book for last. The book with the heaviest subject matter. Just sort of a content warning, this book does deal with death and substance abuse. It's a nonfiction book. That's why I saved this book for last, because I know it is such a sensitive and personal topic for many, many people. So instead of watching the rest of this video, you can go ahead and check out my books playlist, where I have all of my reading wrap-ups, some reading challenges, other book reviews, book hauls, all the bookish goodness that you could want or need. A lot of exciting, a lot of fun stuff in there. You should check it out. I'll link it up in the cards. Okay, everyone still here ready for this book? This book blew me away. It is the only nonfiction that I finished this month. I was reading another one that I'll have to finish at a later time. But this book is Death in Mudlick, a coal country fight against the drug companies that delivered the opioid epidemic, by Eric Eyre? Sorry, Eric. When I saw this book, I knew it was an immediate buy, because as someone that lives in Appalachia, someone that has grown up in Appalachia my entire life, has deep family roots in Appalachia, I know all too well about this epidemic. I know it from the Tennessee point of view, I know it from my local area. This book was written about the start of the uncovering of the epidemic. It's written by the journalist who did the digging in West Virginia with his newspaper, did the investigative reporting. He even won, the Pulitzer for investigative reporting on this. Really fought hard to uncover the records that showed in West Virginia the havoc that the epidemic was wreaking there, and brought it to light for the rest of the country. This book, obviously, is extremely heavy. I had to take it in pieces, and I didn't have enough tabs to annotate. I ran out of annotating tabs because I just wanted to... I usually don't annotate nonfiction books, but this is one that I see myself going back to time and time again, just because it is so personal a subject. And I just wanted to mark all these shocking facts in here, so the number of shipments that drug companies sent out compared to the populations of towns. The company decided to limit its US pharmacy customers to 8,000 pills per month. But the review of April sales orders turned up something startling. The regional warehouse in Washington Courthouse, Ohio, was shipping both Family Discount Pharmacy and Save Right Pharmacy in West Virginia more than 8,000 prescription painkillers on average every day. And the two pharmacies were only 30 miles apart. Holy crap! This book is full of such startling and disturbing information that is sometimes hard to take in, but I believe it is necessary just to know how deep this thing goes. If you're interested in this book, if you're interested in this subject, I would definitely say this book is a good place to start. Don't be intimidated by the fact that it was written by a reporter. In fact, I think that's what makes it very, very accessible. Because there are a lot of numbers, there are a lot of facts and figures, and for someone like me where that really intimidates me and my eyes kind of glaze over because two brain cells, I found this book very easy to digest, very easy to follow along with. It's told in a personable narrative sense. They present what needs to be told in the story while also giving the human interest angle that really brings more of the depth of the impact of this into the story and just how deep it really goes. This book just shows how easy the blame game is up in corporate and government in America. It is startling, yet not surprising, just how many careless mistakes were taken between the government and these private companies. And I do mean careless, because they were things that could have easily had their attention brought to, but they quite literally just went, not our problem. It's their fault. It's their fault. Blame them. That's him, officer. That's the man. It's not us. It's them. And then they would point back and be like, well, actually. And then they would point at someone else. It was basically that giant Spider-Man meme, but not funny. It is shocking. It is startling. It is infuriating, which I believe nonfiction reporting of a subject like this should be. And it's the kind of infuriating that I think incites change, incites a spark in people where you won't forget this book. You may forget some of the facts and figures, but I do not believe you will forget this book and just the absolute shocking information and carelessness and the toll on human life that this epidemic has taken. I cannot recommend this book enough to you as a piece of nonfiction, but of course, first and foremost, please take care of yourself, because it is such a heavy and intense subject. So that was the 5 books that I read this month. It was a little bit of a slow reading month for me, but that's okay because I feel like I took my time with these books, and because I did that, I was able to intake the information more appropriately, and I'm happy with that. I'm fine with that. That's gonna be it for me today. Like I said, I have a whole books playlist for you to check out full of recommendations, challenges, hauls, all that good stuff. But as for now, thank y'all so much for watching. If you ain't heard it from anyone else today, I love you. Love and peace.